Hey guys, MrPokke here. I didn't stream today because I've been up the entire day as well as night just cooking up more guides for starsavior for y'all. I just wanted to do a quick little video regarding should you be pulling for Rosaria, which is going to be the next Cosmic Ranger that's going to be coming on the 2nd of April after the Hail Day banner ends. So just a couple of my thoughts so far as to whether it's going to be doing good for your account. So for a little bit of context as of this current moment, I have pushed my operation to roughly 21-24, which is going to be at a almost 40,000 deficit as of this current moment, which at this point it is gonna become a lot slower. So for those of you guys who are slowly working your way up to, like for example 1836 or anything else, don't worry about it because there's nothing left for you guys to kind of rush anyways after 1836, since you have already unlocked the hard journey. So from this point onwards, it's just gonna become a lot slower. So even for those players that will and spend money, you are just gonna slow down tremendously at this point, because if you take a look at my current units that I currently have, if I want to bring one of their levels up from level 164, you're gonna need roughly 3 million of these books as well as 459,000 gold. So at this point, even books are gonna be considered a scarce resource. So once you hit past level 160, it's gonna be where everything will start slowing down, and that is where you want to basically think about what other units do you want to build to diverse your roster for different element content as well as for RTA, right? Which is why I want to talk about whether should you guys be pulling for Rosaria in the first place. So that is gonna be my current progression, and of the current PvP gauntlet I have played extensively. I think almost 79 wins, so I've played more than like 100 over games as of this current season. I'm gonna be the current rank 2, which frankly doesn't really matter because all of the early game elo at this point, it's either you match up with Koreans and people from Japan and they'll just absolutely destroy you with like almost 90% certainty, or you match up against other global players, but a lot of which are just testing out and they don't really know how to draft for PvP. I'll give it like a couple more weeks when more and more players show interest in PvP, then maybe by then we can get a little bit more in-depth PvP experience, right? So today's video is just going to be focusing on Rosaria based on my personal experience from the drafting, from the PvE, and whether she's going to be adding value to your team. So the number one thing that we kind of have to take a look over here is just a more detailed look into her kit. She is going to be a unit that is first of all from Counterside. So if you guys play Counterside, this is my first ever gacha game. In fact, the first ever game I've streamed in my entire life for both YouTube and Twitch. So I have a lot of nostalgia when it comes to Rosaria. Back in CS, she was like this 4-course unit that's like an aerial ranger, and then now she got an awakened form, and here she is gonna be in our current server for starsavior, right? So for her unique passive, essentially what she does is she has this sort of quote-unquote additional life, where if you were to hit her with any attack that will drop her below 40% HP, she will not drop below 40% HP. So that's how it works. So essentially, it would take her at least 2 different hits to remove her from the board, which means that she is almost a perfect unit for PvP, especially against anti-cleave. That if you guys have played enough RTA, you will know that the meta nowadays, especially after you ban out a Hail Day, Emily, as well as Ashira, it is usually going to be cleavers or assassins, like your Bunny Charlotte, right, your Dana, your Luna, right, your Bunny Claire, all these like high burst DPS damage to try and get rid of the opponent's DPS as fast as possible, and then eventually you'll pretty much just win simply by either outspeeding or out-damaging their DPS. So Rosaria, when she's gonna be introduced with a kit like this, it will mean that no matter what you do, you will need at least 2 different attacks that will get rid of her. So this makes her incredibly annoying to deal with. So not only can you not one-shot her like most assassins, you will also need 2 of your units' turns to basically take away from the board. So I personally think just from this passive alone, she's gonna be an excellent PvP unit. With regards to whether she's gonna be working in PvE, it is mainly going to be tied to the kit from the ultimate as well as the skill. So to kind of summarize a little bit, this ultimate effect, it will give you this additional skill damage and speed buff, as well as this Inferno, which will increase your ruler's judgment, which is going to be your skill. So you will essentially cast this ultimate for a defense down. At max level, I can just turn this up to max level. At max level, this is going to be a 100% defense down with a 50% action value advance. So you want to first cast your ultimate, and then after you get an action value advance, you cast your skill, which is gonna be a massive AoE. And with all of the different stacks of Inferno, you're gonna be able to increase your damage. So at max stack, it's gonna be 20% increased damage as well as 1 additional basic attack. So her entire kit is just go in, cast a massive ultimate, apply defense down, then you just slam your skill. So in a PvP context, usually within an ultimate into skill, most if not all of the enemy's squishy DPS will probably straight up just die. But for PvE, that's where it gets a little bit more interesting, because it really just depends on how much damage can she deal over a consistent time frame, because her entire kit so far is looking to be like a burst DPS, right? So the moment you let go of your ultimate into your skill, you have to wait for your things to come back to cooldown again, and this is already with the cooldown reduction, so that's gonna be a 5-turn ultimate into a 3-turn skill, which generally speaking, it is not going to be as fast as you would like to, because I don't know what her actual damage multiplier is. So you can see over here, it is going to be 52.5% attack as well as the 15% additional damage increase. But because of this defense now, it will actually allow you to deal way more damage than expected. So my personal opinion is, with regards to PvE, she is most likely going to be a unit that will pair extremely well with the debuff team. So for example, if you're going to be using units like Muriel, which is gonna be this other mage over here, Muriel has the ability to essentially extend your debuffs. So any debuffs on the enemy turn, you are gonna be able to extend them, inclusive of things like defense now. So what I guess might happen is, if we are gonna be coming over here and we want to form a team around Rosaria's PvE usage, so we can just come this, I'll remove all. You are most likely still going to be running Rosaria because she's going to be really strong. Then you're just going to be, okay, let's just pretend that Lacey is going to be our, okay, let's just pretend Lacey is going to be our Rosaria. So this is going to be Rosaria into Rosaria, and then this is going to be, I am thinking, most likely Muriel, because Muriel, not only does she have the additional extend for all debuffs, she herself personally can also apply attack down. So if you guys have been facing difficulties when it comes to endgame PvE stages, especially when your CP deficit, the gap is going to be very large, you will actually notice that attack down is a massive damage reduction regards to bosses, because the way that the damage formula works in this game is basically attack minus defense. That is pretty much it. So the higher the gap between an attacker as well as the defender's defense, it will make the damage wider. The smaller the gap, the smaller the damage. So anything with attack down or defense up, it will allow you to take significantly lower damage, which is also another reason why Emily has been such an insanely good unit, because of the buff from the ultimate giving you a team-wide defense up. So you're going to be taking a much lower amount of damage compared to someone without defense up, right? So that is going to be what I'm guessing. So after you get yourself the Rosaria as well as your Welt Ashura, getting in Muriel to extend your debuffs as well as just getting her own burns, and that means that she's going to be able to apply additional damage from her actual S2, because this is going to increase your damage from each of the debuff on the enemy, right? So that's going to be very nice. And then for the very last slot, I am personally guessing this is most likely going to be a stabilizer. So you can run something like, if you want to go for more DPS, you can go for your Bunny Charlotte, which is going to be our game's highest possible DPS. And then if you want to go for a little bit more tankiness, you can just go for Emily, because at this point, we're not running Lacey anymore, right? We're just going to be running Rosaria into our sustain. And then if you want to go for Emily, she can do her role as a tanker instead of like a DPS. So she's purely just going to be tanking additional HP, give her a little bit more crit rate, and then keep your team alive by casting your skill on the unit that's going to be on the lowest health, right? And then on other case, you could also continue to run Lacey. So let's just pretend this is actually Lacey. And let's just say like Naru, right? Okay, let's just say Naru is going to be our Rosaria. I can also see this team happening, because Lacey herself also has her unique debuff, right? So Lacey applies this debuff called Entangle Dream. So this debuff, it will also stack on top of your attack down from Muriel. So I think this is also a really strong comp. So you're essentially not just going to be getting 30% attack down, which is going to be from the ultimate. You're also going to be getting an additional 10% more attack down. So this is going to lead to a 40% attack down by stacking Muriel's debuff, Lacey's debuff, and later on, eventually also Rosaria's personal defense down debuff. So I think this team is going to be extremely strong for a debuffer team. And then I'm not too sure if you can actually survive the damage without Welt Ashura, but you could even consider running Lydia, which is going to be right here. Lydia has not seen a play for a very long time, because the above team doesn't tend to do super well with Lydia, since her majority of the utility is going to be tied to the speed down, as well as this thing called Unknown Hex, which is decrease your effect rest as well as speed. So from her personal damage, most of the time, you don't need to run a full debuffer team, and you still need someone to stabilize your team and make sure that your team can basically stay alive, which Welt Ashura is going to be able to do perfectly fine. So I think if you are looking to go for a team comp building around Rosaria in PvE, I personally feel that this is most likely going to be our best in slot team, one of the best in slot teams. Rosaria, Welt, Muriel, and then this is pretty much gonna be a flex. So you could be running Lacey, you could be running Emily, you could be running Bunny Charlotte, or even if you want to run other DPS, or for example, if you want to run a little bit more like Bunny Claire, right, against your what is this? Yeah, against your fire DPS, right? Your red DPS. You could also run things like Frey for a little bit more team like crit rate buff. That could also work. But if you want to go for Hilde, I don't personally run this team just because Hilde without another tank at least for like a 0 limit break, she's not going to be adding a lot of utility because she only helps you tank damage and not dish out damage. And the only reason why my personal main team, so I personally use this team to clear content, is because I also have another unit called Emily where she can give us a shield to keep our entire team alive a lot longer. It is like a pseudo version of the store team that I introduced to you guys back in the team building video. So that is pretty much going to be that quick little segment. So to kind of compare how Rosaria's damage is going to be like, you can just take a look into the skill coefficient for another unit such as Lacey, right? So Lacey is also going to be another Cosmic Ranger from the Dark Element, and for her coefficient is actually going to be 110%, whereas for her ultimate it is going to be 52.5%. Then if you take a look into Rosaria's multipliers, you can kind of see that her skill 2 is going to be at a 80% multiplier, and then her ultimate is going to be at a 52.5% multiplier, which is going to be the exact same as compared to Lacey. Now, since her skill 2 is, I'm pretty sure this says single target because it says ravage the enemy. If it says AoE, it will say all enemies. So if this is going to be a single target damage, if you do get yourself 3 stacks of Inferno, it will actually be more than 80% multiplier. So assuming that this is going to be getting the additional buff from the 20% damage increase, as well as triggering 1 additional basic, this is going to be another 50% damage multiplier. So in reality, Rosaria's damage is actually extremely comparable, if not much higher than Lacey, because she has a lot of personal buffs as well as action value advance on top of providing a defense down. So this is just to kind of take a look at what to expect for damage output with another ranger such as, for example, Lacey. And one more thing to know before I jump into the pool value in the Arcana, we also can see a potential use of Yumina, because Yumina is something that applies a lot of debuffs as well, namely the multiple stacks of Bleed, which can also be extended by units like Muriel. So Bleed with additional defense down, with additional attack down, everything. It is quite interesting to see how actually both of them, even though in counter-side they are like enemies, they actually work. I think they should be able to work decently well with one another. So you can run like a Rosaria plus Yumina plus Muriel, and then you get a sustain like a Welt's Ashura. So I would say by the time that she's going to be rolling around, you're probably going to be able to save up a lot of your cosmic, or rather your limited observation tickets, to straight up just redeem her from the shop right here, which is why I highly recommend you guys never ever use this to exchange for an RGB unit, because if you take a look at the rates, this is 2% rate up for a RGB, whereas if you're talking about a cosmic unit, it is going to be 1%. So the odds of you getting Rosaria from purely pooling, it is literally 25-75 instead of a 50-50. So generally, what I would highly recommend players do is you spend your limited pools, or rather the rate up pools, on a RGB banner unit, right? If you like Hilde, if you like Yumina, pool on them first, save up this 200 points, and then redeem the copy for Rosaria. I think it's going to be a lot more efficient on your gacha income with regards to efficiency. However, on the other hand, if you have zero interest, right? If you have absolutely zero interest in any of these limited banners, which I personally don't think that's going to be possible because we do have a Welt's Ashura banner. If you have zero interest in any of these banners, then you can just go on Rosaria, because you're not going to be spending your limited tickets at all, right? But 99% of the time, this is not going to be happening. So definitely spend this for Rosaria to save yourself more pools, right? One last thing before we pretty much end off this video, and that is just going to be a quick little discussion on Rosaria's Arcana. So I've already talked about this in my Arcana tier list. Basically, the way that this Arcana works is that you want to use it with a ranger with AoE, so that when you are gonna be able to get a attack, any attack, right? This could be a basic skill or ultimate. If you can stack this on, it is gonna be a 15 attack up, right? 15% attack up, which is a considerable attack buff, because if you want to think about it, the current highest attack buff that we have in the game right now, it is going to be from, or rather at least in Arcana form, it is going to be Rin, right? Rin has the highest single attack buff, which is only going to be 8%. So for Rosaria, you are basically getting more than almost the double the value of a attack buff. And like I mentioned just now, the gap between the damage formula is the higher your attack, against the enemy's defense, the more damage you're going to be dealing, right? So this is honestly a really, really good effect. It is just that you really need to crit. So for players who are pulling for this Arcana, just really get in the crit rate to as high as possible so that you can make use of this effect to the best of our capabilities, right? I can see this definitely being run on Rosaria. You could also run this Arcana on other rangers. So if you filter by ranger, good units to have in mind is definitely Lazy, because Lazy's ultimate is going to be AoE attack. Lydia also has an AoE, but I don't think Lydia is going to be that crazy of a unit. Yumina's ultimate is also going to be an AoE attack, and she scales with crit rate, so she's pretty much going to be having a very easy time pivoting into Rosaria's Arcana. We also have ourselves Belle, which is going to be somewhat of a pseudo debuffer / crit DPS, and her skill 2 is going to be considered as an AoE, so she can also give her additional attack buff for her ultimate to do way more damage. So generally speaking, I would say that this Arcana is definitely going to be very strong. You just need to remember to stack on enough crit rate for your units to make use of this special effect, right? Other than this special effect, just taking a rough look, she also gives us a 4.5% crit rate, which is just very nice in general. So I would say for the Arcana, definitely consider pulling. Now for the pulls on Arcana, it is actually not going to be 1% because there are no such thing as a cosmic Arcana. So you can take a look at, even for Ashira's Arcana, it is going to be 2% rate up, right? So for Arcanas, you can just go ahead and pull for this. In fact, if you do not want to pull for any of these units and you only want Rosaria, you can just pull on her Arcana first because it is 2% rate up, and then go for this Arcana, spend the pity after you pull an Arcana on Rosaria, right, to get the maximum efficiency, right? One last thing I want to talk about before we bounce off is, do you need to pull for Rosaria's dupes? Personally speaking, I don't think this dupes is gonna be that crazy good. In fact, I think this is one of the most unimpressive dupes that I've seen in a while, because it basically just increases your attack, which is gonna be just a raw attack buff. So unless you are a will and stat check in PvP, this really doesn't matter at all. And the other thing is increasing your attack up buff by 1 additional turn. So from a limit break 2 and 3, you go from 1 turn to 2 turn to 3 turn. So the only real effect that actually takes place is gonna be at limit break 2, which is honestly quite a steep step up, because for example, in Wells Ashura, you see immediate impact the moment you go into limit break 1. And on top of that, attack up additional turns, it doesn't really change too many things, because first of all, we have a lot of different units that can give us attack up, assuming that this is not a unique attack up, right? So if you can go for like Charlotte, Bunny Charlotte, right? You have your Dana also giving you an attack up. So we have multiple units that give you this buff, so it is not a very rare buff to begin with. Second of all, this will only trigger when you actually drop below 40% HP. So if you do not trigger this effect, which is after you take damage, then this thing will not even activate at all, and you can only trigger this once in the entire battle. So it's not even refreshable. So personally speaking, Rosaria is gonna be a excellent unit at limit break 0 with her Arcana, and that will be my personal recommendation of stopping. For myself, I'm definitely gonna be putting a copy of her because, you know, I main counterside all the way back then. I am basically like the OG counterside player, so I'm definitely gonna be going for it. Let me know what you guys think in the thoughts and comments below, and I'll be seeing you guys for more Star Savior content. And for the past couple of days, this game has been absolutely crazy, so thank you for the support and joining our community. Join our Discord, catch our streams, use code POKE for 10% off gamer subs, and I'll see you guys next time. Alright, take care.